Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, cell phone use in schools, a distraction or a teaching tool? Should school board elections be partisan, but aren't they already? And a good night for Harris, but will it matter? Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by former county council member and CEO of SkillSmart, Mike Knapp, and vice chairman of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Dwight Patel. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. In 2006, almost a digital lifetime ago, education professor Bruce Cooper warned that cell phones are here to stay. More and more work is being done on those communications devices. They morph into, well, historically, Blackberries and handheld calculators, digital cameras, radios, and even televisions. What an anachronistic statement. Just think about how we've progressed. But here in Montgomery County, the first personal mobile device regulation was implemented back in 1992. And as a result of a recent update, MCPS students are allegedly not allowed to use phones during the school day unless permitted to do so. That carve out, however, is big enough to drive an electric powered school bus through, because students with special needs can use certain devices, and middle school and high school principals can decide whether they can use their phones during lunch, and students have access to school-issued Chromebooks. Mike, so many young people are adroit at using smartphones and tablets that it would seem natural to allow them to use these devices even in classroom settings, because they certainly will be allowed to use them in college. Yet some educators believe that students are addicted to their cell phones and there should be a blanket ban on their use during the school day. What do you think?
I think it's really interesting. Since you raised this as a topic, I went back and did some research and was actually intrigued to see what the data showed. And I think it demonstrates that, one, technology can be a significant distraction, and even students recognize that. That being said, it's also a real challenge to say, here is a blanket policy. And so one of the things that clearly came out in the reading that I was looking at was, if you're going to do this, you have to be able to get buy-in along the way. You've got to bring students along. You've got to bring parents along. It can't be just a, hey, here's what we're doing and we're done. You've got to be able to come up with something that is adaptable and flexible to the students into the school system. And yet the reality is that the studies show it takes 20 minutes to get your mind back focused to what you're doing in a classroom after doing a text or doing something on your cell phone. And so there's clearly an impact. There's clearly an impact in the classroom. The challenge is, how do we do this in a way that doesn't create anxiety for students, doesn't create anxiety for parents, and actually allows us to get better outcomes?
Well, the thing that struck me, Mike, and I'll go to Dwight on this because it dovetails into the question I was going to ask Dwight, is if you have some special needs students using Chromebooks and other devices in their learning environment, then how do you ban the use for other students? So, Dwight, why this? I wanted to ask you about this. State School Superintendent Carrie Wright said that there needed to be a balance regarding cell phone usage. Now, is that possible?
I think there is a balance that's out there that can be found. One being that cell phones are for security purposes, and as in, if there's an emergency, you want to be able to get in touch with your child in schools. A blanket policy banning altogether or putting them in a locker, really, I think it's about, we need to teach discipline. It's kind of like I went to school in the 80s and 90s, and kids pass notes around and stuff like that. And basically, this is just the next generation of passing notes in class, texting, and so on. It really is good as a parent if you could reach your child at any time. Let's say, heaven forbid, another 9/11 or a massive weather tragedy happens. You want to be able to get in touch with your child,
or potentially another school shooting. Hey, how about that?
Yeah, I didn't want to go down that road.
Yeah.
Well, but here's the thing. I mean, if you are allowing some students to have uses of it and others not, how do you reestablish that balance? And there was another article that I didn't include in what I sent you guys about how teachers feel burnout because so many students are distracted by cell phones. So how do we rein this in? We got about a minute left. I'll give each of you about 30 seconds.
Sure.
The exciting thing to me is the fact that this is one of the few bipartisan issues I've actually found out there, that everybody recognizes this is a challenge. They recognize it's a problem. And I think that to be able to work together to a common solution can be done. I think, to your point, Casey, I mean, right now there are students that learn differently and use different tools in a classroom that some use, some don't use. So I think the notion of being able to use technology for some students in some certain circumstances and not for others is not an insurmountable obstacle to be able to overcome. And so I think we can get there, especially if we're working together.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't think we should ban. I think it goes back to discipline, making sure, kind of teaching the kids at a young age that, hey, you do what you don't, text in the middle of class, you can text at lunchtime or after school or before school, make call, whatever. And I think it's about teaching the discipline. And I agree, we can't have a blank, you can't just ban it for some kids and not for others.
All right. So, well, thank you. Obviously, Montgomery County is working through this, as is the state of Maryland, because every jurisdiction has a different standard, unlike Virginia, which is trying to impose one standard for the entire state. Coming up on our next topic, locally in the digital age, Adam Pagnucco has, been a really wonderful resource through his column, Montgomery Perspective, about what is going on in the county. And I'm going to use this term in a complimentary fashion. He's a muckraker. He picks up, he's a sounding board to keep government honest. And so his online column, Montgomery Perspective, is a fun and well-researched read each day about the happenings in Montgomery County. And in this week's column, Pagnucco exposed the fact that the Montgomery County Republican Party Central Committee here in Montgomery County sent out an email blast promoting a candidate for the nonpartisan school board race and queried, in so many words, whether this was such a good idea. Dwight, should political parties give endorsements in nonpartisan races? We have nonpartisan races, not just for the school board, but in elections for local municipalities like Rockville and Gaithersburg and some others. What do you think?
I think parties are at the liberty of endorsing whomever they want, but I don't think we should be running Board of Education or Town Council or Kensington Mayor, Rockville Mayor on a partisan level. Parties can endorse, but I don't think we need to have it get to the point where you have, people running on party lines, Republican line, Democrat line, even though it is unofficially, it does happen, frankly. We've got, Montgomery County Teachers Association, pretty much everyone, I don't think they've ever endorsed a Republican candidate for Board of Ed in the last 15, 20 years or so. I think it's time, it's like if a party wants to get behind a candidate, more power to them, I know not in Maryland, but I know in Nassau County, New York, there was a year where the Republican Party backed a very conservative Democrat candidate for Board of Ed. So I think we keep, parties should be allowed to endorse whomever they want, but I don't think we should make, a Republican primary, Democrat primary, because it just adds costs and more of a bureaucracy.
Okay, so we just put them all in the mix. But Mike, wink, wink, nod, nod. I mean, the Apple ballot comes out each and every race, and as Dwight mentioned, there's no distinction in who they're endorsing.
No, I mean, I think that's true. I think the reality is that we live in a county that's predominantly Democratic. And so many of the candidates who are running tend to be Democratic, although the orientation, I think, especially running for Board of Education, is a nonpartisan orientation. And I personally think that's a good approach. I don't necessarily disagree with Dwight. I think organizations and people can endorse who they choose to endorse. Sharon Cox, who was from Germantown and was a great board member, I think ostensibly at the end of the day was a Republican, but she never ran as that. She ran as a board member. I think she was elected 2 or 3 different times, did a great job. And I think that I just think it's important for us, especially when dealing with education, to at least have the races be nonpartisan, have the individuals run as individuals, and organizations and folks will endorse who they choose to endorse.
Well, here's the question that I was thinking about. You know, the number of people who understand who the candidates are in a school board election, the voting populace is rather limited. And wouldn't this give a greater profile to those candidates and allow the voters to have a better understanding of who they're voting for?
I actually
not
think
hide behind the mask of being independent.
No, I think it actually goes the other way. I think for something like Board of Education, while people don't necessarily inform themselves or get educated on who those candidates are, I think if you align them directly to parties, I think you run into a problem of, and unfortunately you see this in most jurisdictions, not just here, people will vote for the party that they believe they're associated with, as opposed to actually understanding what it is they're voting for. And I think especially with something like Board of Education, you should be taking that extra step to figure out who's making those policy decisions on the basis of your children. And so I like the nonpartisan notion. I think if you align them to parties, I think it actually does a disservice.
Right? You get the last word here.
Okay, my last word is, I think, pretty much, it's a foregone conclusion. Basically, Montgomery County, anyone on the Apple ballot is a Democrat. I think the last Republican they ever endorsed was Connie Morella. So, I mean, making these Board of Education things partisan, having, Republican banner, Democrat banner, it basically, I think as a Republican in Montgomery County, it hurts us because if you have a Republican running, the Democrats will assault you immediately. If you did on the at least this way, we have a slight chance. Like Steve Abrams, who was a Republican, was on the Board of Ed last. I think he might be the last Republican that was on the Board of Ed. And I think that's why we keep it the way it is. And also, actually, I think we have too many candidates running on the gubernatorial cycles. We should maybe move the Board of Ed, all the Board of Ed candidates, the presidential years, so people can actually focus on the candidates.
Okay. Well, Mike had a quizzical look on his face about this, and Steve Abrams was a dear friend.
No, I know. I couldn't remember if Steve or Sharon served last. I think.
Well,
Steve
I think the distinction is that Sharon never ran as a Republican,
right?
And Steve did, and he was a great guy. When we come back from this short break, this past Tuesday night was a good night for Vice President Harris, but will it matter in 6 weeks? Stay tuned.
Hey world, I have a quick message. It's about safe driving. All right, let's go. Anytime you're driving, have the seatbelt buckled tight. Both hands on the wheel and your phone out of sight. When not in your hand trying to text somebody back. Because if you do, your car might get smacked. The moral of the story, just put your phone down. The people on the road will stay safe and sound. Put your phone down, put your phone down. People on the road will stay safe and sound. Yeah.
Jordan knows he shouldn't eat this entire bowl of nachos, but tonight he's earned that right because a few hours ago in the middle of happy hour, he recognized a sign. Not from the gods or a bolt of lightning, but from a double heart, a kissy face, and a fourth ha in ha ha ha. That's when Jordan knew he was buzzed. So when it was time to go, he got a ride home instead of driving. Be a legend like Jordan. Recognize your buzzed warning signs and get a ride home. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
And welcome back. There was much anticipation this past Tuesday in the run-up to the televised debate between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. Questions abounded. Could Harris match up against such a formidable opponent? Could Trump keep focused and not lose his temper, as he did in the 2020 debate with Joe Biden? All the chips, they seem to be on the table. The New York Times said it was a good night for Vice President Harris, that she was certainly seemed to win the debate. Conservative radio talk show host Eric Erickson said of Trump's performance, let's be honest, last night's debate was a disaster. Donald Trump seemed aloof, defensive, unprepared, and easily distracted. He jumped into every trap that was set for him by the Harris team and the moderators while blatantly missing countless opportunities to sell his economic message and tie Kamala Harris to the failings of the White House. Those were pretty big orders. Mike, even the New York Times admits that Harris did not have a perfect night, however. And the online website Liberal Patriot, I got tongue-tied here, said in the aftermath that Harris and the Democratic Party has a problem with the working class. So the question is, Did it truly matter who won the debate?
I think it did, because I think there were a number of folks, and we saw this going in, there were a number of people in polls who indicated that they needed to get to know her as a candidate better. And I think it gave those people an opportunity to see that. We could argue that there are ways to continue to get to know her better, that should she share as much as she could have, should have. I think that's a debatable point, but I think that she showed that she could be presidential, that she had thoughts and policies that are well versed and could present them well. And I think the nice thing was she could draw a distinction with her colleague on the other side, that it didn't take much to kind of set him off. And I think that was an important piece for people to see as well.
So Dwight, Senator Bernie Sanders last week, on last Sunday, pulled the curtain back a little bit when he was asked whether Harris had abandoned her progressive ideals, to which he replied, "No, I don't think so. She's not abandoning her ideals. She's being pragmatic, and she's doing what she thinks is right in order to win the election." Is it going to work?
I don't think so, because every time Americans go to the supermarket, they're paying $4 for a loaf of bread, $3, $4 for a dozen eggs. They're paying $5 for a gallon of milk. Bacon is up, ground beef is up, everything is up. And people understand that when they go to the grocery store. And another, crime is up everywhere. We've got, because of the border crisis, and this is all directed to Biden-Harris policies, which has led to high inflation that we haven't seen in years. I know they're cooking the books and playing the numbers. Oh, inflation's down. Yeah, but it was already up like so high to begin with. And I think that's this debate. I mean, I don't think there's been a presidential debate that has actually tipped an election either way in the last 40 years, going all the way back to the Nixon-Kennedy debates, frankly. And at the end of the day, President Trump could have had a phenomenal night, and the media still would have said Kamala Harris won. And she had a lot of assists from the moderators of the debate.
She had two assists that were facts that were checkable and had to be brought out. That was it. There were two. There were two in that whole debate.
And she never got fact checked at all about the hashtags and this.
So my question to you, I got a question for you, Mike. You know, we also had to reintroduce the vice president. Is that because she didn't have any votes cast for her in the primaries?
Wait, say that. Ask that question again.
So we all know that Vice President Harris replaced President Biden as the nominee after the nomination process had been completed. So the question is, why have to reintroduce her, since she's been on the ticket for and been a member of the administration for the last 4 years?
I didn't say she had to be reintroduced. There were a number of people in polls who indicated they thought they needed to get to know her better. I can't speak to why they thought they did or didn't need to do that. I just know that's what people had indicated. I think she has been out and been visible, and I think that people could see and know who she was throughout this entire process. But I think it was an opportunity for those people who felt they needed to get to know her better, an opportunity to do that. So I think that was fine. And I think the nominating process isn't complete until the conventions complete the nominating process. So it was completed when the nominating process was completed at each of the conventions, both Republican and Democratic. It wasn't necessarily completed beforehand.
Right. Okay. That's
However, many times when I hear the rebranding of Kamala Harris, I go back to the 1968 with the new Nixon. This is the new Kamala. It's the same as the old Kamala, but in a new packaging. They change things around. And again, it comes down to the economy. As James Carville eloquently said, it's the economy, stupid. And she is not talking about everything. She's talking about spending more money. She's agreeing with President Trump on every one of his policies. I'm waiting for her to come out now in favor for not taxing overtime wages, which the president came up with this morning, or was it last night?
Well, it's a perfect opportunity. The late Joe McGinnis wrote a book about the Nixon election called "The Selling of the President," and how it was a marketing campaign was introduced. We're probably going to need another book about this election, "The Selling of the President 2024."
I guess I would just say that I think the economy is important. And I think as we look at the indicators for the economy, inflation is down. That doesn't mean all prices are down yet. Gas will be under $3 within the next within the next 2 to 3 weeks, which is the lowest it's been in years.
But that's because we switch over to the winter blend.
We're seeing crime down. Crime is down across the country, in spite of what former President Trump has indicated. All indicators are. Doesn't mean that people aren't seeing anecdotes where they and everyone needs to feel safe and wants to be safe. But if you look at a macro level, crime is going down. A lot of the things that he was pointing to just aren't true, and that's not unusual.
Well, we know one thing, Mike. We know they're eating the ducks and the geese. So maybe not the cats and the dogs, but they're certainly eating the ducks and the geese. Stay tuned for parting shots when we come back from this short break.
When I first saw a turtle, my heart was full. Now anything but lonely.
We had this deep connection, this heart connection.
He just wants to be close to you and part of your life.
Every day with turtle is a perfect day.
When I'm holding her, it makes me feel calmer.
I think everything he does shows how much he loves us.
When we adopt a shelter pet, we discover they're a little bit of a lot of things.
But they're all pure love.
If I could go back and change it all, I would. I think I'm gonna miss you the most. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Or maybe it's just the little moments. If I could go back and change it all, if I could go back, I would. But I can't.
Welcome back. This past Wednesday, across the nation, we honored those that died 23 years ago who were victim of a terrorist attack on 9/11/2001. There were 11 Montgomery County residents who died that day, and in their memory, I'm going to read their names: William Edward Caswell, Dr. Gerald Paul Fisher, my friend Michelle M. Heidenberger, Angela Marie Hoots, Teddington Ham Moy, Lieutenant Darren H. Patel, Todd Hayes Rubin, Patricia J. Statz, and Ernest M. Wilshire. There's a lovely area dedicated to these fine souls in Rockville, near the Rockville Courthouse, and there was a celebration of their life honored this past week. I hope everyone has a chance to visit, and I hope you don't forget those whom we've lost. Now, with their own parting shots, Mike Knapp.
Thanks, Casey. I have a cousin, Jim Patrick, who passed that day as well, worked for Cantor Fitzgerald in one of the towers, and our family was very deeply struck by that. And so I thank you for bringing that, and thank you for sharing that with everyone today. In memory of those people, and in one of the real instances where our nation came together, I just think it's important for us, especially in what's been a particularly divisive election season, for people to recognize that there are unifying forces that bring our country together, and there's more that brings us together than tears us apart. And as we move forward in this election season, to take our diligence, do our studying, and make sure that at the very least we're showing up and participating in the electoral process to continue to make our country as strong as it can possibly be.
Dwight Patel, your parting shot. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Casey, again for bringing up 9/11. My friend Barbara Olson was on the plane that hit the Pentagon. Very tragic day. I still remember, going on the rooftop and seeing the smoke from the Pentagon. It's a little disappointing. The presidential debates didn't talk about it, but my parting shot is go Baltimore Orioles. You're doing great. 2 out of first place. This is going to be their year, I think. Go O's.
Well, I hope so. It would be wonderful to have another World Series champion in the region. I also want to say that today is Friday the 13th, and like every Friday the 13th, it's Colgate Day, in honor of the 13 men who established the great fine university that I matriculated from. They established it in 1819. And some wise students decided that on every Friday the 13th, it would be time to party. So happy Friday the 13th, and happy Colgate Day. I want to thank you both for appearing, and I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.